Why, baby? We already know what happened. Champagne and caviar. That's what it is. Every single day. Teaching it for almost a decade now. I love everything. I love life. History is power. History is what every single person uses every single day. It is one of the most important tools you can have in your toolkit. I was a person who was told by my parents that I was dyslexic. I shouldn't be writing books. Shouldn't be up in a classroom of 150 people. Don't let your fears rule you. I am Professor Bart Elmore. I teach environmental history, which is this really cool blend of environmental science and history, kind of trying to understand how humans have reshaped nature and also how nature, tornadoes, earthquakes, things like that, have reshaped human history. It's kind of this great dynamic. I've been teaching it for almost a decade now and been here at Ohio State for 3 years. My advisor, Ed Ayers, he was a historian at the University of Virginia. He told his mom that he was going to become a historian. And his mother said, "Well, why, baby? We already know what happened." We already know what happened in the past. Why do it? And the reality is what he taught me and what I learned over time is that that's the vision most people have of history. But it is at the base of everything. To be a good citizen, to understand why certain people are treated differently than others, why there's economic inequality, why climate change is happening. You have to know the past. What historians do is they pay attention to humans. They listen to the stories of real people in the real world. From those facts, we're actually able to create solutions and policies that are grounded in the reality of the day. Some people would say, why is there such a big difference between minority populations in terms of their income in this country and their wealth and citizens of this country? That has a history that if you don't understand it, you might say, well, these people are just different than these people, right? And that's where racism stems from, is a lack of understanding of the history that leads to these inequalities. But it's very easy to explain. We don't have to even go back to slavery that far ago to think about how this plays out. We can go back to the post-war era, World War II. At that time, the federal government created an agency called the FHA that provided guarantees on loans for people to buy homes. The FHA was administrated by local agents who systematically discriminated against black citizens from getting homes. By the 1950s and 60s, 98% of these suburbs were white. What is the most important and valuable financial asset you can hold as an American? Real estate and land and a home. And one group of people, 98%, got this opportunity. And virtually no one from this group, minority communities, black Americans, got it. If you don't know that, then you're not going to understand why in 2018, one group of people's wealth and income is up here and another's down here. Champagne and caviar, that's what it is every single day. That's not what it is at all. It's hard work. I wake up around 6:37, come to work pretty early. I'm here to about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And basically what I'm doing is juggling teaching. I'm trying to figure out how to structure lectures, write lectures. I then go in and teach those lectures. The nice thing about our job is we're given a lot of time to plan our teaching. I only teach 2 classes here, which sounds crazy, I know. But it's so that I can sit there with the material and come in for those 2 classes and teach with really high intensity. I'm also working on my research and book projects, my own personal books and projects that I'm going to project out to other people. I'm working on films as well, documentary films, which is kind of cool aspect of doing history. So if you're interested in going to Hollywood, there's no reason why being a historian you can't go to Hollywood. I was just there. You got all these things going on, so you're never bored. It's like, okay, the class I got to teach, young minds. And then I've got this cool book project I'm working on, and the films and the radio. I think people look at historians and they're super boring. And maybe they were. At one time, I met some of them. They seem really boring. I know why people think that. But our generation and the past several generations, I just don't think that's the case. It's really exciting and dynamic. best thing I like about my job is when I sit in my office, I'm content. I'm content. And I know what that feels like because I know what not being content feels like. And there's nothing better than that. Lessons I've learned to younger people, learn from younger people who are teaching me values every day. I don't answer to folks in this job in a way that I would at other places. I'm not doing anyone's dirty work. I'm not compromising my ethics. I'm not challenging my own values every day I come into work. I get to live out my values, do what I think is right. With history, you got the globe. You have got every single possible culture that you could possibly study. Every different language. One of the great things is you get to learn languages. I'm reading Portuguese magazines right now and listening to Spanish on my way into work, so I can talk when I go to Colombia. I choose what I want to do. One of the things that's important to me is family. So unlike being in a place that says, no, you need to be here till 9 o'clock, I am the boss and I get to say, I want to go home now. And because I'm so passionate about my work, it's about getting the work done. It's not about being in that office for 9 to 5 just because you need to punch a time clock. That freedom to do that is incredible. It's incredible. It's a great gig. It's a great gig. Every job has things that aren't great. Dealing with academic journals would probably be up there, just kind of like trying to convince this peer-reviewed journal that your idea has significance, when in fact what we should be doing is sharing ideas, as imperfect as they are. There's a certain kind of perfectionism that certain journals that are very prestigious in our country and around the world have, which is to say we like to reject, only a certain percentage get accepted. I hope that model is going away, but it's certainly probably one of the more frustrating aspects. You work on a piece and then some person in the middle of nowhere says, well, I just don't like it, so it doesn't get published. And then that idea that you've been working on, isn't part of the conversation. If you come from a poor background and you don't necessarily have a lot of resources, you can get paid to get a history PhD. People just don't know that. It doesn't always work out where funding is provided, but you'll know in advance. Like, you'll get a package when you get admitted that says, here's your tuition covered, here's your health care, here's your funding. And you can make choices at that point. That's one of the unique things about these kind of humanities PhDs. I think if I'd known how hard it is to get a job academic job in history, really known how hard it is, I would have thought, no way would I try that. And so ignorance is bliss. I just didn't know enough about how hard it was that I didn't try. You just got to land in the right spot at the right time. They need the job. You just came off the market and you're perfect fit for it. I'd rather have rolled the dice than not. And I really do think the fact that I just didn't know enough about how hard the market was to go do it. It's a huge risk. But anything that's worth doing has a risk to it. So I say, if you're really passionate about it and you think history is your future, go for it. I think anything. You can have a pretty diverse background and then still end up doing really well in graduate school. And sometimes it's the best way to do well in graduate school, precisely because of what I said. History is about the human experience. So the more experiences you have, the more stuff you've done, the better you're going to be as a historian. If you have a sense as a younger person that you like a certain area of history, just taking classes in specialization as an undergrad in that, I think is really smart. I took South African history, I took Roman history in undergrad, we're taking Chinese animation and film class. I took just a wide variety. And then I specialized in American history when I got here. And I realized that that really wide net was really helpful because it gave me more perspective. Because once you get to graduate school, you start focusing in really closely on your topic. The cool thing about history is you can have a very broad liberal arts background and do really well in grad school. Tenure track is kind of the highest level, which is kind of jobs where you're on a track to become a permanent, long-term, secured job at a big university. Tenure track. Adjunct professorships, which are usually renewed every year, a lot less security. Then there's also visiting assistant professorships, which are usually 1 year or 2 year appointments. And so what you're doing that 6 years, you're looking at everything. You're just trying to see any jobs that are out there. You're hoping for a tenure track. If you get a tenure track job, you're an assistant professor, and you remain in that position for probably 5 or 6 years. For history, you got to publish a book. You publish a book and a couple articles. Then you can get tenure. The book is the big thing for our discipline. So if you publish a book and it's decent press and you've got a couple articles with it and your teaching isn't bad, you'll probably get tenure. This is the biggest issue in our field, which is the discussion about what do we do with all these PhDs. Going either work for museums, going to work for archives. A lot of people will go do that. Work for different federal agencies. You know, an environmental historian might go work for the EPA. Diplomatic historians, they go work for the State Department. Those are definitely good positions. Think tanks in DC, these are organizations that think about policies and how to shape legislation and laws. I know a lot of people that end up going into that area to shape politics. You can do anything. You have to be self-motivated. Because there's no managers and there's nobody overseeing, you could always be working on your project and you could always be thinking about it. So good historians are both able to set their own deadlines and schedule and cut it out when they're not doing it. Friends, rejuvenate, new ideas, thoughts, friendship, fellowship, then back, work. One of the most important things is people that can do that are really good at structuring their own time, their day, making clear lines between your personal life and your work life. I was kind of nervous about public speaking, and now here I am sitting and talking to you over YouTube, right? And I feel, here's my hands. But I remember having that, you know, like everyone has, where, you know, nervous in class and couldn't speak. And I remember having like embarrassing moments in school where I thought I was supposed to give a presentation and I just did, I was so nervous. And I think, interestingly, I might have avoided this profession because I have to do this all the time, right? I might have said, that's my Achilles heel and I'm not gonna mess with it. Don't let something that you're not good at prevent you from doing something that's gonna make your life awesome. If I had said, I don't really like public speaking, I'm not gonna work on that, I'm just gonna avoid it, then my life would be very different. That was the biggest change as I worked hard on it. I learned how to walk into a room and prep a lecture and do it with no notes. I don't read my notes like a lot of historians will do when they come in. I don't do any of that stuff. I love the presentation and I embrace it now. Now it's like my favorite thing to do. When I was really young, my parents told me I was dyslexic, which means I wasn't able to really process words, and I went to a special school as a result of this. I went through a lot of rigorous training on this type of stuff. I wasn't someone who just read because I loved it. It was actually work for me, but yet I understood that reading was incredibly valuable. So I read a lot over the years because I knew that doing that would give me knowledge, which would give me power and the ability to do things I wanted to do. You have to do 3 things really well to be a historian. We call it walking, talking, and chewing gum at the same time. You have to be able to communicate with people over a broad audience, verbally, public speaking, and also in writing. You have to be a good teacher. You have to be able to communicate with young people and have that energy to do that every day. Any kind of economic recession, we end up being affected like anyone else. Funders and things like that, they want to fund STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, because that's where the new iPhone's going to come from and things like that. And as a result, humanities has faced really serious budgetary crises. That's crazy. We're underfunding history. We're underfunding these humanities, and it's disgraceful because that's what universities were all about, providing a space for creative and innovative thinking in these spaces that weren't just going to be just about knowing the past, but actually using the past to better the future. So I think it's a really exciting time to be a historian because we're no longer just stuck with the tweed jacket, as you can see, in the archive, studying with the yellow pieces of paper, and we're all kind of hunched over with our bag. We're very much in the world and of it. I think that's kind of fun. Very, very late. So for anyone watching this, I think the key takeaway is you're never too late to start your career and start your passion. I wanted to save the world, right? And I thought that the best way to do that was to be a doctor. I quickly realized that, I don't know, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't something that I was super passionate about. I was always taking history classes in undergraduate, and so I said, okay, well, why don't I major in this and see what happens? And realized that history had incredible power. I switched to history as a major. I also tried to cross the country on bicycle and didn't make it. I tried to paddle to the Gulf Coast by myself in a kayak and also didn't make it. And then at that point decided to go to graduate school, and everything changed after that. You know, I found this field of history that I really love. I think when most people say I'm going to do something in history, a lot of people say, oh my gosh, how are you going to find a job, right? And I think that's not the way you should think. My parents, fortunately, my father was an avid reader. My mother also read a lot. And both of them supported this kind of intellectual pursuit. For those folks who don't get their support from their parents, you shouldn't listen to them on this issue, because honestly, history is power. History is what every single person, whether they're a business person, a politician, a justice on a Supreme Court, uses every single day. It is one of the most important tools you can have in your toolkit. And so for me, I'm happy I chose it, and I'm happy that I had a family that said, hey, this isn't a crazy idea, you should go do it. My problem is I love everything. I love life. I love kayaking. I love mountain biking. I love volleyball. I love basketball. I like soccer. I like baseball. I like photography. I was a DJ. I like music. I love to play guitar. I like to sing. I love it all. I use all those things. I use all those different things when I'm out doing my research. In other words, all these different hobbies just become part of your life, and in some ways they're extensions of the work. It's almost like they're seamless. I don't feel like I have to compromise my hobbies for my job, which is kind of cool. There was a store that sold camping gear and all that stuff. I said, ooh, I can get deals on that stuff, so I'm going to go work for them in the summers when I was in high school. But the connection to today is that that's still part of who I am. Like, I didn't lose, you don't lose, interestingly, you lose all those pieces of you. I'm an environmental historian because I was interested in the outdoors. I was connected to the outdoors, and so that connection has carried over into what I do. So that was my first job, working at a camping outfitter store. Oh yeah, all the time. The cool things about being a professor is you get to go to conferences, which is really cool. I do global environmental history, which means I get to go to anywhere I want. Depending on what I want to choose to research, that's the cool thing. There's so many choices, and you get to pick, okay, I'd like to do this for a couple of years. It's a great lifestyle because you get to change what you're doing throughout your life and say, okay, I wrote about Coca-Cola, which I did, and now I'm going to write about Monsanto, this other company. And that'll take me to Brazil in the spring. I'm going to Brazil to study them. You get to travel the world. What's good about that? You meet people that aren't from where you're from and don't necessarily speak the way you do. That is another way in which this profession makes you a better person, because you get to listen to those stories and you get to become connected to a world community, a global community, in ways that makes you more thoughtful, makes you a better citizen. Smallpox. Pre-1920s, we're struggling. Historians sit there and they realize things that other people are just like, oh, that sounds fun. They're not thinking about the whole experience. You're so aware as a historian to say, no, I wouldn't want to be in 1700 America because I'd die of dysentery, This is what's the problem with historians. The easy answer would be like, oh, I want to hang out with George Washington and look at his wooden teeth, But the problem with that is, slavery is going on. So you just become very aware of not only the good of the past, but also those unsavory sides. For me, the big issues are related to the environment. I think one of the biggest things I'm trying to point out is that a lot of the corporate models that we have for growth are really broken. I'm really interested in this question of how we transform our economy from an economy that says that is value. More furniture this year than last year means that our company is valuable. Well, we got a lot of that furniture. So to what degree can we reshape our metrics? can we begin to transform our economy from an economy that just produces stuff to an economy that actually solves problems. All the people that supported me through the process. I had exceptional advisors. They showed me a path forward that said, this is how you do history in a way that respects people, that is, respects the people you work with, respects the students that you're going to be teaching, and also respects the historical actors you're going to be writing about. Showed me how you could be a good person and a historian in the same thing. You should absolutely, definitely pursue understanding what it means to become a historian. It can change your life. It can make you a better person, better citizen, a better husband, better wife, a better businessman. Every single person on this planet uses history to make decisions about what they're going to do. Most of them do not have history in their toolkit. You can, and you can teach it. And you can have the freedom to study the things you want to study as a historian and to not be beholden to anybody about what you want to do. You ask me, that's a pretty good profession. And it's one that makes me sleep pretty easily at night. So I hope some of you out there consider this whole gig, the historian, as a cool route for you in the future. And if you're questioning yourself, if you don't believe in yourself, we all do that. I was a person who was told by my parents that I was dyslexic. I shouldn't be writing books. Shouldn't be up in a classroom of 150 people. Don't let your fears rule you. You have an opportunity to change the world. You have an opportunity to engage in a world that needs you. We've got climate change, these issues that need your energy and your input. Come join us.